Soft ringing cuts through the silence of a cold November night. The dispatcher answers, 911, what's your emergency? A man's voice comes through. Polite. Calm. Too calm for what he's about to say. I think I've killed my wife, he says, almost whispering. There's a pause and then he continues. But she's still alive. I don't know how, but she's blinking. I thought she was dead. I put her in the freezer. The dispatcher stiffens. Every 911 call is serious, but this is something she has never heard before. I need someone here now. She can't speak, she can only blink. Once for yes, twice for no. The man drives away from his own home. He has confessed. He has left evidence. But the reality is more horrifying than anyone could imagine. Somewhere inside the freezing cold garage, life and death are blurred. Every second counts, and no one knows what will happen next. It was a quiet night in Springfield, Tennessee. The streets were empty, lit only by the weak flicker of streetlights. Inside the 911 dispatch center, Claire sipped her lukewarm coffee, trying to stay awake during the slow night shift. Then the phone rang. She answered automatically, but the voice on the other end stopped her in her tracks. Calm, eerily calm, polite even, it was the kind of voice that should have sounded reassuring, but what it said made her blood run cold. I think I killed my wife, said the man, his tone measured, almost casual. Claire's hand froze over the console. Hundreds of emergency calls had crossed her desk, but something about this one was different. Too calm. Too deliberate. Her instincts screamed at her that this was real. I shot her, in the temple. I thought she was dead. I put her in the freezer, in the garage, he continued. Her mind struggled to process it. The freezer? In the garage? The voice showed no panic, no hysteria, only quiet, matter-of-fact confession. Sir, stay on the line. Are you sure she's breathing? Claire asked, keeping her voice steady. I don't know, he admitted. I thought she was. But she's blinking. I checked. Blink once for yes, blink twice for no. A shiver ran down Claire's spine. She had heard reports of people seeing things in delusion, but this was different. There was a twisted, tragic clarity in his words, a man caught between reality and fantasy. Dispatchers immediately sent officers, while Claire kept him talking, her voice calm, measured, coaxing him for every detail she could gather. Joseph Parker, 45, drove away from his home, leaving the door unlocked, a deliberate trail for law enforcement. Inside the house, the freezer hummed quietly. He could not admit fully that Samantha, his wife of 12 years, was already dead, yet he had convinced himself she was alive. The flashbacks came unbidden. For years, Joseph and Samantha had seemed ordinary, if somewhat reclusive. Windows always closed, no time spent in the yard, few words to neighbors. But beneath the surface, the marriage was strained. Joseph had lost his long-time job at a local Toyota dealership. Bills piled up. Foreclosure notices arrived. Tension grew like a silent storm. On the night of November 4th, everything unraveled. Frustration, fear, and a sense of hopelessness collided, and in a blur, Joseph took the gun. He didn't plan it. He didn't consider the consequences. He just acted. Afterward, in a state of disbelief and guilt, he placed Samantha in the garage freezer, certain she was dead. Meanwhile, Claire guided officers over the radio, giving them precise instructions while trying to maintain her own composure. Her training told her this was a high-risk situation. Joseph's calm, his apparent concern for Samantha's survival, painted a picture of a deeply unstable mind. He spoke of love and guilt in the same breath, confessing a horrific crime while begging for her life. Police arrived at the Parker residence. The windows were curtained, the door unlocked as Joseph had promised. Inside, the scene was far worse than the dispatcher could have imagined. Samantha lay frozen, her body mangled by the attempt to fit her into the freezer. Her injuries were fatal. The blinking Joseph had described was nothing but a cruel trick of his mind, a delusion formed to cope with his actions. Joseph's car disappeared into the night, and the officers prepared for a pursuit, hearts pounding with the fear of what this man might do next. Claire stayed on the line, the words, "I love her. I still love her," echoing in her mind, chilling in their sincerity. He had confessed to murder, yet his mind remained trapped in an impossible reality, believing the victim lived because he could not face the truth. The night stretched on, a tense game of waiting and tracking. Every passing second heightened the suspense. Joseph was on the move, the police in pursuit, and the dispatcher's voice remained the only tether between reason and madness. For every detail she gathered, the story became darker, more tragic, and more real. The question lingered like smoke in the night air. How could someone commit such an unspeakable act and yet still believe they were saving the victim? How thin is the line between love, guilt, and insanity? As Joseph drove further away, officers closed in. His mind raced, thoughts tangled with panic, regret, and delusion. He had committed an unspeakable act, but he had also set in motion a chain of events that no one could have predicted. In the silent streets of Springfield, the night air carried the weight of terror and tragedy, a man on the edge of reason, a dispatcher holding the line, and a world watching in disbelief at the darkest depths of human behavior. Joseph Parker's car disappeared into the winding roads outside Springfield, Tennessee. The night was thick with fog, and every shadow seemed to twist into shapes of danger. Inside the 911 dispatch center, Claire monitored the incoming updates from the officers on the ground. Her heart raced, a mix of adrenaline and dread. She could feel the tension in the room, each second stretching longer than the last. Officers had tracked Joseph's vehicle southbound on the I-24, weaving through traffic with eerie calmness. He wasn't frantic. There was no desperate speeding, no panicked swerving. His hands gripped the wheel, steady, controlled, yet his mind was a storm of delusion and guilt. The paradox of his calm demeanor and the horror of his crime made him unpredictable and dangerous. Back at the Parker residence, forensic teams arrived to document the scene. The freezer hummed quietly, a chilling monument to the crime that had unfolded. Samantha's body, frozen and mangled, told a story of violence and desperation. Evidence was collected meticulously: fingerprints, blood samples, fibers. Every detail mattered. Every tiny clue could unravel the twisted logic of Joseph's mind. Meanwhile, Claire kept the line open, listening to officers' updates and simultaneously coordinating with other units. Each new piece of information revealed a man increasingly detached from reality. He had believed for hours that his wife was still alive. He had spoken to her, imagined responses through blinks and gestures. It was a delusion fueled by fear, guilt, and perhaps love. But reality was merciless. Samantha had been gone from this world for days. As the pursuit continued, Joseph made small, deliberate movements. He didn't want to hurt anyone else, yet he was aware that he was being hunted. His thoughts raced. Memories of Samantha, their years together, the financial pressures, the arguments, the silent tension that had built up over time. Every memory twisted into a rationale for his actions, a way to justify the unjustifiable. Police finally spotted him near a rest area. A tactical team quietly surrounded the area, positioning themselves to intercept without giving him room to act violently. Joseph parked his car, stepping out slowly, eyes darting, aware that the net was closing. Claire's voice came through the radio. "Joseph, please stay calm. We're here to make sure everyone is safe, including you." Joseph's eyes were glassy, a storm behind them. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "I just wanted her safe. I just wanted her safe." The officers advanced cautiously. Each step was tense, measured, filled with the uncertainty of confronting a man who had already proven capable of unimaginable acts. Then suddenly Joseph raised his hand, not in surrender but towards his pocket. In an instant it became clear he had a firearm. The air grew taut, charged with danger. Officers shouted commands, voices sharp and unyielding. "Drop the weapon. Step away from the car." Time seemed to slow. Joseph's mind raced through memories, regrets, and a final, impossible hope. He had imagined calling 911 as an act of mercy for Samantha, yet now he faced the ultimate confrontation with reality. The weight of his actions pressed on him, crushing any rational thought. In a single, tragic decision he raised the firearm to himself. The sound cracked through the night. The chase, the fear, the delusion, it all ended in a heartbeat. Officers rushed forward, but it was too late. Joseph Parker had escaped accountability in the most final way possible, leaving behind a trail of horror, grief, and unanswered questions. The investigation didn't stop with his death. Claire and the forensic teams meticulously documented every detail, piecing together the last hours of Samantha's life, the mental state of her husband, and the unraveling of a seemingly ordinary family. For neighbors, it was incomprehensible. For authorities, it was a case study in the extremes of human psychology. How guilt, delusion, and desperation can twist reality into something horrifyingly unrecognizable. Even as days passed, the echoes of Joseph's voice on the 911 call haunted those who heard it. Calm, precise, terrifyingly real. "I love her. I still love her." Words that were at once sincere and horrifying, a testament to the complexity of the human mind when pushed to its limits. Springfield returned to quiet, but the tragedy left an indelible mark. Families, neighbors, and even the officers involved could not shake the unnerving truth. One man's delusion and desperation had led to death, terror, and a story that would be told and remembered for decades. The case became a subject of national attention, a grim reminder of how a single night can reveal the darkest corners of the human psyche. Every call, every shadow, every chillingly calm confession painted a picture too real to ignore, leaving listeners and viewers with a lingering question. How well do we really know the people closest to us? The morning after Joseph Parker's death, Springfield was eerily silent. The street outside the Parker residence seemed almost frozen in time, mirroring the chilling stillness inside the home. Police officers, crime scene investigators, and forensic specialists moved with careful precision, documenting every detail, photographing every angle, and collecting evidence that would later be critical in understanding the mind of a man who had committed unimaginable acts. Meanwhile, the 911 recordings were already making their way into the hands of national news networks. Reporters replayed Joseph's calm yet horrifying voice, dissecting his words over and over. "I love her. I still love her." People across the country were shocked, their fascination fueled by the contradiction between his professed love and the brutality of his actions. Social media exploded, discussions spiraled, and the story became a viral sensation, drawing both horror and morbid curiosity. Psychologists and criminal profilers began analyzing the case, trying to understand the delusions that led Joseph to believe Samantha was still alive. Dr. Helena Morris, a forensic psychologist, commented on national television. Joseph Parker's case is a textbook example of cognitive dissonance amplified by mental instability. He couldn't reconcile his love for his wife with the reality of her death, so his mind created a scenario where she was alive, giving him a false sense of control and hope. Inside the Parker household, investigators carefully examined the freezer. Samantha's remains, tragically preserved in ice, told a story of terror and confusion. Every detail, the way the body was positioned, the marks left by attempts to fit her into the freezer, revealed the desperate and delusional state Joseph had been in during those final hours. Forensic specialists noted the delusion of seeing Samantha blink, categorizing it as a coping mechanism for a man unable to confront the reality of his crime. The neighbors, still in shock, shared their memories of the Parkers. Everyone spoke of a seemingly ordinary couple, living quietly, rarely socializing, and always keeping their windows closed. They were private, yes, one neighbor admitted, but never violent. "I would have never imagined something like this could happen." Their disbelief added to the nationwide shock. How could a man so quiet, so ordinary on the surface, commit something so horrific? The media coverage intensified. National news programs interviewed experts on mental illness, obsession, and domestic violence. Each segment seemed to delve deeper into the paradoxical nature of Joseph Parker, a man capable of love yet driven to extreme violence, a person whose mind had fractured under pressure, delusion, and despair. Clips of the 911 call were analyzed repeatedly, showing the eerie calmness in his voice even as he described horrific acts. Across the country, families and law enforcement officials studied the case. Police departments held training sessions discussing Joseph Parker's delusion and the warning signs of extreme cognitive dissonance. His case became a cautionary tale, How ordinary stresses, financial struggles, job loss, and marital tension can, in rare instances, catalyze catastrophic outcomes when combined with mental instability. At the same time, local journalists sought interviews with the emergency dispatcher, Claire. She recalled the night vividly. Every second felt like an eternity. I could hear the fear in the air, even though Joseph sounded calm. He believed he was saving her, but in reality, he had already crossed the point of no return. Her account painted a chilling portrait of the night's events. How a single call could hold both the hope of saving a life and the horror of witnessing a mind unravel. Even after Joseph's death, questions remained. How long had his delusions been forming? Were there moments when he recognized reality but couldn't act? Could intervention have prevented the tragedy? These unanswered questions haunted the investigators, the psychologists, and the public alike. As the days turned into weeks, a deeper investigation began into Joseph's past. Childhood trauma, previous signs of mental instability, and his struggle with financial stress were all examined to understand what could have led him to commit such a crime. Friends and family spoke cautiously, some expressing disbelief, others recounting moments of tension or strange behavior that now seemed ominously prescient. Meanwhile, the story of Samantha Parker resonated on a personal level with audiences nationwide. She was remembered not just as a victim, but as a person whose life had been abruptly and violently ended. Tributes poured in, with people reflecting on domestic violence, mental health awareness, and the fragility of life. Her story became a stark reminder that behind every shocking headline, there is a human life, tragically cut short by circumstances that, in rare but catastrophic instances, spiral out of control. Even months later, the 911 call remained one of the most analyzed and replayed recordings in American history. Its chilling calmness, the dissonance between love and horror, and the tragic conclusion had etched Joseph Parker's story into the collective consciousness. Investigators, psychologists, journalists, and viewers alike continue to grapple with the horrifying truth that sometimes ordinary people can be pushed beyond the limits of sanity, leaving devastation in their wake. And yet, the story wasn't just about tragedy, it was also about awareness. Domestic violence, mental health, and the warning signs of psychological distress became a central conversation in Springfield and beyond. Programs were developed, educational campaigns were launched, and law enforcement agencies used the Parker case as a critical learning tool for crisis response and preventive measures. In the end, the legacy of that night remained a mixture of horror, fascination, and reflection. Joseph Parker's delusion, Samantha's tragic death, and the nationwide attention it garnered had created a narrative that would not fade. The story served as both a cautionary tale and a lens through which to examine the complex, sometimes terrifying depths of human behavior. The aftermath of Joseph Parker's horrifying actions sent shockwaves far beyond Springfield. As the story of Samantha Parker circulated across the nation, media outlets clamored for interviews, exclusive footage, and expert opinions. Every news program seemed to replay the 911 call on loop, dissecting each word, each pause, and the eerie calmness in Joseph's voice. Psychologists, law enforcement officials, and journalists alike were fascinated and horrified by the cognitive dissonance he displayed, professing love while detailing unspeakable violence. While public attention focused on the tragedy itself, investigators continued to dig deeper into Joseph's life. His childhood, previously unremarkable to neighbors and friends, was re-examined with a forensic eye. School records revealed incidents of extreme isolation and early signs of obsessive behaviors. Teachers recalled a quiet boy, brilliant at times, yet withdrawn, who struggled to form lasting social connections. Mental health professionals speculated that years of untreated stress, combined with personal and financial failures, had created the perfect storm for his ultimate breakdown. In the Parker household, forensics teams meticulously documented every inch of evidence. The freezer, now a grim artifact, revealed the extent of Joseph's delusion. Samantha's remains were carefully preserved in case further psychological studies were conducted. Each bruise, mark, and cut was photographed, analyzed, and cataloged, not just as evidence of the crime, but as a testament to the chilling lengths a mind can distort reality. Experts later described the act of placing her in the freezer and interpreting her frozen body as a catastrophic coping mechanism, a delusion that allowed him to believe he could still save her. Meanwhile, the 911 dispatcher, Claire, became an unexpected public figure. Her composure under pressure, her ability to remain calm as a man confessed to what he believed was a merciful act, became a case study in emergency response training. Police departments across the country requested her insight for workshops on handling extreme confessions. She emphasized the psychological challenge of remaining calm while knowing a life hangs in the balance, and how subtle cues in the voice of a caller can reveal desperation, delusion, or even danger. The Parker case also ignited national discussions on mental health awareness and domestic violence. Talk shows, newspapers, and online forums debated whether intervention could have prevented the tragedy. Neighbors, colleagues, and distant relatives came forward to share anecdotes of warning signs they had ignored or failed to recognize. One chilling story described Joseph obsessively checking locks and windows in the weeks leading up to the crime, behaviors neighbors assumed were eccentric but not dangerous. Legal experts also weighed in. Even though Joseph died before he could stand trial, his actions raised questions about accountability, mental illness, and the role of law enforcement in preventing domestic tragedies. Could authorities have acted if someone had reported unusual behavior? How could the justice system address cases where a perpetrator dies before prosecution? These discussions dominated news cycles, underscoring that the Parker story was more than a singular tragedy. It was a mirror reflecting societal failures, mental health crises, and the thin line between love and obsession. Meanwhile, national crime shows and podcasts began featuring the case. Interviews with experts delved into the psychology behind Joseph's delusions. Each segment highlighted the terrifying reality. A person can appear ordinary, even loving, while harboring dangerous psychological fractures beneath the surface. Sociologists analyzed the societal factors, financial strain, social isolation, and access to firearms, that contributed to the final, devastating act. As weeks passed, the Parker family's neighbors continued to process the horror that had occurred so close to home. Their once quiet streets now felt tainted by a sense of unease. Some moved away, unable to reconcile the normalcy they had known with the violent act that had shattered it. Others stayed, determined to confront the tragedy and learn from it. Community programs on mental health and domestic safety were established, inspired directly by the case, ensuring that Joseph Parker's legacy, though horrifying, could catalyze awareness and preventive action. Even with months passing, the 911 call remained a central focus. Its viral nature kept the Parker case alive in the public consciousness. Students in psychology courses listened to it as part of coursework. Law enforcement trainees studied it in crisis management workshops. Journalists referred back to it as a chilling example of human unpredictability. Each replay reinforced a single truth. The human mind, when pushed to extremes, can distort reality in unimaginable ways, creating scenarios that blur the line between life and death, love and obsession, reality and delusion. And yet, the story carried another layer of tragedy. Beyond the sensational headlines, Samantha Parker had been a life lost, a family shattered, and a neighborhood forever changed. Her name became symbolic of victims whose lives are cut short by mental instability and domestic violence. An enduring reminder that behind every viral story, there is an unrepeatable human life, silenced before its time. In the quiet hours of Springfield nights, those who remained could still feel the echoes of that fateful day. The soft hum of the streets, the memory of closed windows, and the chilling knowledge that a life taken in delusion had forever altered the course of a small community. The story of Joseph and Samantha Parker, now etched into American crime history, had become more than just a cautionary tale. It was a lens through which to examine the fragility of sanity, the consequences of isolation, and the terrifying reality that sometimes, the most ordinary people can harbor the darkest secrets. Even as Joseph Parker's life ended in a desperate act, the ripples of his crime stretched far beyond Springfield. News outlets nationwide were relentless, dissecting the 911 call, replaying it on air, and publishing every known detail of Samantha Parker's last days. Social media amplified the horror. Clips of her last moments, expert commentary, and citizens debating the causes and preventability of such domestic tragedies went viral, turning a small-town crime into a national conversation. Psychologists and behavioral experts appeared on talk shows and news panels, analyzing Joseph's delusions and obsession with Samantha. They highlighted his chilling claim that she was alive in the freezer, blinking at him, a grim example of cognitive dissonance and extreme mental fragmentation. Some described it as a mind trapped between reality and fantasy, a horrifying illustration of untreated psychological issues combined with financial stress and isolation. Students of criminology pored over the details, studying the progression from ordinary behavior to murderous delusion, while law enforcement used it as a case study for training in crisis intervention. Meanwhile, the Parker case ignited national debates about domestic safety and early intervention. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues recounted strange behaviors in Joseph and Samantha's home. Minor signs, like Joseph obsessively locking doors, Samantha rarely leaving the house, or their withdrawn demeanor, had been overlooked. Public discourse questioned whether such tragedies could have been prevented with better mental health support, community awareness, or law enforcement vigilance. Television networks turned the story into documentaries, producing reenactments that showed Joseph's final days, the eerie calm of his demeanor, and the chilling scene at the garage freezer. True crime podcasts dissected every word of the 911 call, analyzing the pauses, inflections, and strange calmness that made it so unnerving. Each broadcast seemed to amplify the haunting nature of the case. A man who appeared loving and normal, yet committed an unthinkable act under the veil of obsession and delusion. Legal scholars debated the unanswered questions surrounding Joseph's death. Since he took his own life before arrest, there would be no trial, no public testimony, no final reckoning. Experts highlighted a terrifying reality. Sometimes the law cannot provide closure, and the true story behind a crime remains partially hidden, known only through investigation, forensic evidence, and chilling confessions. Communities far from Springfield were not immune to the story's lessons. Workshops on domestic violence, mental health screenings, and awareness campaigns were initiated in multiple states. Neighborhoods created support groups to monitor signs of extreme stress or isolation in families, determined that no warning would go unheeded. In schools, students were taught about the danger of ignoring warning signs, emphasizing empathy, communication, and vigilance when someone shows signs of extreme withdrawal or mental strain. Even months later, Springfield streets carried an unshakable tension. Families moved cautiously, doors and windows were watched more vigilantly, and the memory of that fateful 911 call remained in local consciousness. For many, it was not just the story of a murder, it was the story of what can hide behind closed doors, the duality of human nature, and the fragility of sanity when pushed past the breaking point. For Samantha Parker, her life became emblematic of victims of domestic tragedy, ordinary individuals whose lives end too soon under circumstances that could have been mitigated with intervention, awareness, and mental health support. Memorials were created, and her story became a symbol of caution, raising awareness for those who might otherwise suffer in silence. Joseph Parker, despite the horror he wrought, became a case study in psychological journals, illustrating the extreme end of obsessive delusion, and how guilt, financial stress, and social isolation can fracture the mind. His chilling calmness, paired with violent action, served as a warning. The face of danger is not always identifiable by aggression. Sometimes it wears love and normalcy like a mask. In the end, the Parker story transcended its local boundaries, leaving a legacy that was both tragic and instructive. It reminded the nation that violence can hide behind ordinary appearances, that the human mind can twist reality in horrifying ways, and that intervention, whether through mental health services, community vigilance, or simple awareness, can mean the difference between life and death. As the nation processed this story, every replay of the 911 call continued to send chills down the spine. It became more than a viral recording. It became a lesson, a warning, and a haunting memory that even the most ordinary households may contain hidden shadows, waiting for a trigger to reveal the darkness within. And somewhere, in quiet Springfield nights, the echoes of that phone call, the tragedy of Samantha, and the unsettling calm of Joseph lingered, A stark reminder of how fragile life can be when obsession, mental instability, and isolation converge into a single devastating moment.